Hi, baby boomer fans. We are Jackie and Janine, the Pfeiffer sisters, and love to talk about the 1950s, inviting you to reminisce with us as we explore experiences of that decade.
We chronicled the distinct memories of our childhood in our book, While the Windmill Watched, a slice of rural America in the 1950s, which takes you on a notably historic journey through that often forgotten decade. We also want to hear about your experiences during the 1950s. We will feature guests whose special stories of that decade will bring to mind magical moments of reflection, some with tears, some with smiles, but above all, a good dose of laughter.
We would like you to chat with us as we bring to mind the sights and sounds so familiar to that time in history. Grab your favorite malt or Green River. Make sure you are wide awake and get ready to be inspired about the 1950s. Welcome to the 1950s Fun Chat. Greetings, everyone. We are so glad that you are joining us again. This week, you will love hearing the story that our guest will tell about growing up in the 1950s. And of course, that is really America's story. Each one of these fun chats that we have weekly does introduce you to someone who lived in America in the 1950s and are sharing their experiences about that time, whether they grew up in the city or they grew up on a ranch or a farm. But before we introduce today's guest, Jackie, we want folks to notice that in the lower right-hand corner of our screen is a red button. And we certainly hope that you will subscribe, that you will click on that and subscribe to our 1950s Fun Chat channel. Then also in the left-hand side is the thumbs up. Please click on that. Just take your mouse and click on it, because that way you will then have an opportunity to give us indication that you have enjoyed this broadcast with our guest today. Jackie.
And while you're perusing the screen, take note of the banner that's running across the bottom. It is the website that we'd like to have you check out, www.whilethewindmillwatch.com. And then in the upper right-hand corner, you will notice a beautiful North Dakota sunset. And that sunset wraps around the book, While the Windmill Watched, a slice of rural America in the 1950s. Our book includes so many memories that Janine and I have living in the northern Great Plains in the 50s. And now I'm really excited to introduce to you our next guest. Her name is Helen Danielson, and she was born in December 1944 in Sidney, Montana, and raised on a cattle ranch in northwestern North Dakota near the Badlands, 40 miles north of the beach in McKenzie County. Now, after graduating from NDSU, Helen was a home economist for the Northern States Power, which opened doors to work with 4-H and homemakers clubs in Extension media work specifically, and that expanded then into the expanded food and nutrition program. But then after obtaining her master's degree from NDSU, she worked in the Family Relations and Child Development Department. So Helen taught in the department and later became the North Dakota Early Childhood Training Center employee, and she retired as a liaison for North Dakota Kids Country. So today she lives in Fargo with her husband, Russ, who is a native Eastern North Dakotan. Helen and Russ met at NDSU in Fargo. They have 2 married daughters, and they have 4 grandchildren. So Helen, welcome to the 1950s Fun Chat.
Well, thank
Hi,
you.
Helen.
Hi, Janine.
Helen, have any of your family members continued to live on the ranch?
Oh, yes. My brother is still on the home ranch. And like you said, it's located in McKenzie County, and it's I don't know. It's hard to describe where it's from or where it is. But anyway, he's continued to grow the ranch and actually expand the ranch, and has his son also who's married and lives on the ranch. So it's a family affair. And I just love to go home. And the second Friday in March, we always try to go home for the annual production sale for his registered red Angus.
Sure,
Okay.
sure.
So-
Now,
So-
when you When you grew up, did you have red Angus on the ranch too, or is this something that he has come upon and expanded?
Yeah, it's evolved. Of course, back then it seemed like Hereford was the prominent breed in our country anyway. And then my dad started doing a little crossbreeding with Santa Gertrudis, and then when my brother came home from college, then he introduced getting into the red Angus. So they've been doing registered red Angus for, I think it's 35 years. Maybe they've been having production sales now. So
Wonderful,
pretty long time.
wonderful.
Yeah. You know, Helen, sometimes movies and television often incorrectly romanticize living on a ranch. So life is not easy. Farming is not easy, no matter what the era. A successful ranch is created by cooperative hard work of all family members. So can you give us a few little examples about living on a ranch in western North Dakota?
Oh, wow. Well, like I said, it kind of was distant from any place. It's kind of on the edge of the Badlands. So we didn't have oiled roads. So we had scoria roads to drive on and a lot of flat tires. And it really was, I guess, what you would consider remote living for quite a long time, because we had, I still remember being in the old house where we had slop buckets, and we had a cistern to catch rainwater, and that's what we used to wash the clothes. And we had windmills sprinkled all across the pastures for getting water to the livestock. And so when I saw the windmill on your book, it just immediately brings back all those memories. And especially, we had a wind charger to provide some of our power for light before we got electricity in our house. And I'll never forget the time my mother came out and she saw my oldest brother at the top of the windmill. And she didn't dare holler, because she thought, if I holler, he'll probably surely fall down. And the other brother was halfway up. So she just patiently waited, and they obviously saw her down there and came down. But it was one of those hazards that you live with on the ranch. And I think one of the other things that we were constantly reminded of is that there were rattlesnakes. And I think I just learned to walk with my nose on the ground, because we were just constantly on the lookout, and never had a really close call. My brother did once, but didn't get bitten. So
good.
A lot of horses got bit,
Okay. So, and then how were the horses treated?
Oh, heavens. I don't remember that. Not sure. I really don't. We always kept just some
Anti-serum.
Anti-serum. I guess that's right. Yeah. Just in case. But yeah.
That's good. So you mentioned scoria. Would you tell our viewers what scoria is, please?
Well, I think a lot of people now use it for landscaping. It's kind of an orange rust-colored rock, and it's caused from the volcanic ash when it boils over and you get a lot of lava. And then we also had the scoria rock that is a product of that whole process. And we had one specific hill on the ranch that I remember where we had a lot of leaf fossils in the rock, and they're really special. And I just love rocks. I think because I was raised in that area, I just am always fascinated by rocks.
Now, Helen, you say you grew up in Northwest North Dakota. Did you have a North Dakota address?
No, actually, our address, maybe when I was growing up, there was a post office at Scar, North Dakota, which was about 9 miles from us. And it was a lot like any small town where you had just a kind of a little general store and some gas, I think, and just what the basic needs would be. But mostly it was a post office. And then it was, I don't remember what year it actually became a rural route, and we were connected to Sydney, Montana. And the mail came a long loop around, and I think it continues today, only they got box offices or box numbers now instead of just rural route. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So did Scar have a school?
No, Scar had a church. That's where we went to church. And actually the church was on the Montana side. So I don't know if technically it was Scar, North Dakota. It was on, the Montana side because it was moved there. And we would have church there twice a month, but our pastor would drive, I think around on the road, it was like 60 miles to come from Savage, Montana to do services at our church.
Mm-hmm. And then where did you go to school? And what was your schooling like?
Oh, wow. Well, I went to Squaw Gap, which would be not politically correct today, I'm sure, but it was 3.5 miles from our place. We were really close to school compared to a lot of the people that had to drive much farther. But it was a one room, 8 grades, and we really that was an era that really there was a lot of transition, namely because it was difficult to get school teachers out in rural areas, and if they did, they probably found a bachelor and got married, So it was really a small school. Sometimes it was just my 2 brothers and I that were actually in the school. And at that time, the teacher was boarding with our hired hand. And so we had school in the backyard an old bunkhouse in our yard. So we would walk to school then. But for the most part, it was like, catching a ride with one of our teachers that drove right by our place to get there. And we had the best drinking water in the country, I guess you'd say, at that time. And so we were always responsible for bringing the drinking water to school. And so she would meet us out at the road, us 3 kids, and my 2 brothers and myself, and our 3-gallon bucket of water. And then we would get a ride to school. Yeah.
Do you remember do you remember what some of the lunches were that you carried to school?
Well, my mom, we always packed our own. My mom was great at just baking bread, and we had hot lunch maybe just a few times later on when I got to be a 7th and 8th grader. I think it's hot lunch. For the most part, we just carried it in a lunch bucket, a black bucket that I think is so familiar to most people. Or some people, I guess, use lard cans to carry their lunch. But it was just basically, if we got a bologna sandwich, we thought we were really rating because we always just had plain old roast beef or jelly sandwiches. The food was whatever was in the cupboard, basically.
And now, did you have a large garden on your farm too then?
Yeah, we did. Yes, we did. My mom raised most everything that we ate. She did a lot of canning because back then, of course, freezing food wasn't quite as common. And if you had a freezer, it's probably full of meat, and we raised our own beef and usually hog and chickens, of course. You talked about chores earlier, and chicken chores were mine. And I detested chickens. I carried those big 5-gallon buckets. One was water, and one was the grain, and put it in their feeders, and and then try and pick eggs, especially if you had setting hens, and
yes.
I remember wearing my 5-buckle overshoes to go pick eggs more than once to just get their head away so I could get under and get the eggs. So, yeah.
And did you have to clean that chicken house then too?
Oh, yeah. You always feel that lie in there, and yeah, we did our fair share of that. It was, a real stinky job, right? Yeah.
But the chickens really appreciated it, though. I remember what our experience. The chickens would be so happy when after we clean and we put down fresh straw.
Who wouldn't be? Yeah, right.
That's right. Well,
Yeah.
Helen, then did you go to high school in Sydney?
I did. Yeah, at 13, basically left home because during the week my brothers and I would stay in town with a widow lady who cooked for us, and then on weekends we'd bring our clothes home and wash and be ready for the next week. Usually go in on Sunday night and then be there for school on Monday and then come home again on Friday if we could. I remember one time though that we got snowed in for 6 weeks, so we didn't get home at all.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So the roads were not good, and even in the spring, sometimes the gumbo or the clay of the road, the scoria just seemed like it just got absorbed almost. It wore out quickly. So
then did you keep a car? You went by car? You had a car with you at Sydney?
Well, when my oldest brother was there, he got a car, I think, when he was like a junior, and then we did. But a lot of times my folks would just bring us in and leave us, and then, depending on what was available as far as transportation. But, yeah.
Was there anything in those high school classes that led you, or in your life in the 50s, that led you to pursuing a career in extension?
I would have to say the doors just opened for me. I don't recall ever really thinking about that. I remember just probably the reason I went on to college was my mom just always assumed that we would go to college, and that was not a common thing back then. But my mom was a school teacher, and she just basically implanted in us that the expectation after high school was to go on to college. And so the first year, I had been involved in Luther League in Sydney with a group of kids, and a lot of them went down to Nebraska to a Lutheran college. And so my best girlfriend from high school was going there, and I didn't know where I wanted to go. And my brothers were going to NDSU, but I didn't know what I wanted. So I thought, well, I wouldn't mind going down there. So I did, and went there for a year. And still, I didn't really want to go into education, which it was a liberal arts, and basically would have been a teacher or some form of that. And so I thought a little expensive probably be going to a private church college and not knowing what you want to do. So I came to NDSU, or transferred to NDSU, when I was a sophomore. And that's when I decided to go into home economics. Yeah.
Okay. And had you had home economics training in high school ahead of that?
I did have a class. Home economics was offered. That was just, I think maybe it was almost a basic, and I guess I wouldn't have modeled my career following my home economics teacher at that time, but
Yes.
I guess maybe we're trying to change the image of it or something. I don't know.
Okay.
Yes. Well,
So
I'm curious
what's
to know, were there 4-H clubs in your area?
No, we didn't have 4-H, and we didn't have, well, my brothers were in FFA, but that wasn't something girls were invited to be part of at that time. And so, no, I basically, we didn't have 4-H. So it's ironic that I ended up going from working at Northern States Power then to going into county extension work and then working with 4-H and homemakers. So I really learned on the job, but I just really enjoyed it. And probably, let's see, about 2 years ago, I got this letter out of the blue from one of my favorite 4-Hers that I had long lost track of. And she wrote a letter thanking, for what it had meant to her. And
Yes.
I just, I guess you don't even realize the people's lives that you're touching sometimes, but that was really special. And I think a good reminder for everyone to maybe think back to those early years, and if you can some way let them know what they meant in your life, it really does touch a person.
Yes. You had
Indeed.
touched on the topic of homemakers clubs. Do you recall, were there homemakers clubs in McKenzie County?
Yes.
When you
Well,
lived in-
I'm not sure if it was a formal homemaker club, but my mom always called it Ladies Aid. And I think they did get lessons from the extension office from time to time, but it wasn't, it was just a lot different than what I more recently worked with, and how they ran it. So it was like, I think they had lessons on making bread and how to can, and when people got freezers, how to freeze food and those kinds of things. So yeah, it was part of the homemakers, and my mom was part of that.
education
Well, Helen,
was
because you
important.
live so long way from anyone and from any place, how did your family socialize with others? Did you do it through church occasionally, or did your family, as you just said, well, we're getting together at Christmas or Thanksgiving or whatever?
Yeah, well, the church was the hub of the community for us, primarily Norwegian Lutherans, and it's kind of funny when you look back to it and think of it as being a social thing, because usually the fourth Sunday of the month was potluck or a dinner, and that brought everybody together until the mid-afternoon, basically. And I yeah, and it was interesting because you think about church bringing families together, and I distinctly remember how the men would sit on one side and the women on the other. Do you remember? Did that ever happen in your community? Well, it was just different, and I don't know when it actually changed, but I think it was probably more when I was in high school that we started sitting together more as a family, or maybe it was when we got a different pastor or something. I don't know. Yeah, but
Yes.
yeah. And as far as getting together, otherwise, the school was really also a hub. We would have Christmas programs and community gatherings. They used to have basket socials.
Yes,
And
Yes.
we did
yeah,
that too.
and the women would decorate shoe boxes and that kind of thing, and then there would be a dance and yeah.
And then the
And
men would bid on those boxes. Is that correct?
that's correct. Yeah, yeah,
Did
right.
you ever decorate a box and hope that there was a certain young man who would bid on your box?
No, I don't remember ever doing that. I was quite a tomboy. I actually was about the only girl in the community. So it was, I was kind of a tomboy all my life. Yeah.
And tell us about Christmas on the ranch. What was that like?
Oh, well, there's always chores to do, on a ranch.
Yes.
There, you just do not leave. You really don't. And we, once in a while, we would, I think during Christmas, I don't know if it was always on Christmas Day, but we would go up to Alexander, North Dakota, where my mom's family resided. And then we'd have Christmas with Grandma and Grandpa there. And sometimes there would be water on the creek and we'd go skating. I remember doing that and sledding. But yeah, kind of like you never knew if you were going to be able to get together. And of course, like we didn't have telephones. So the way they communicated was maybe just send a postcard and say, what time we'd get together and where, and if you came, you came, and if you couldn't, you couldn't. So, yeah.
Tell
But,
us about when you first got a telephone on the ranch.
oh, well, yeah, that really made the news. That was back in 1972, and the Wall Street Journal headlines were, "Today you can call Squaw Gap, but who would want to?" And you wouldn't believe the number of calls that came in from radio stations and around the country to my brother, who was then residing on the ranch, and they had a kind of a community gathering at Squaw Gap, and celebrated the just the being able to call. And I remember my uncle at that time, Art Link, was governor, and I think he had a great hand in actually getting us connected to the rest of the country, because it was a costly venture to get phone lines out in that country. And so even back in 1966, when Russ and I were planning our wedding, I communicated totally with my mom by writing letters back and forth. So, yeah.
That just seems so unique for today's way of communication, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. And when our first daughter was born, which was 1970, Russ called the Christian bookstore in Sydney, Montana, and she had a two-way radio, and my folks had a two-way radio, as did many of the ranchers out there. And then the message got relayed to them that they had a new granddaughter. So, yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Helen, growing up in the 1950s, can you think of one particular instance that might have influenced the person that you are today?
Well, it was really different. I just being raised in such a remote area, because socializing and just even going to town was such a big deal. And so when we had the opportunity to finally do that, it seemed like I guess I would have to say it probably made me think about where do I fit? Where do I belong? I felt like I was such a country girl, and to even go to Sydney was a big deal. And then going off to college, that wasn't such a big deal, because I've been away from home since basically 13. I didn't get homesick at all. But just going on to college and not feeling like maybe I was normal or didn't fit in with everybody, because I hadn't had a lot of the same experiences that other people had had. So that changed. I think probably changed my perspective a lot. I probably, it's like anything, you don't know what you don't know,
Correct. Yes. Well, in wrapping up, what is a fun memory that you can recall having had in the 1950s?
Oh, let's see. I think getting our new house and having my own room, and then getting to go to my uncle's. I remember, got this, the first television in the country out there, and it was a Philco TV, a box, and it had a pink edge around the frame of the TV screen. And we would go and watch that test pattern and watch the snow fly. And that just even thinking about television when you didn't even have a telephone, that was quite exciting. Yeah. So
were you able to get many programs then, or did you have one network?
No.
Or
No,
okay.
I remember one station that we finally got when I was probably in probably sixth or seventh grade, and that was Mickey Mouse. You know,
The Mouseketeers.
yeah, the Musketeers. Yeah.
Mhm.
So, yeah, Annette was always my
Yes.
idol.
No, we
Yeah.
all emulated her. We young
Yeah,
girls.
exactly. Yeah. So, yeah,
And
it was it was a fun life. I mean, it was a free life. You
yes,
you could feel so safe wherever you were, and
yes,
just it was a good way to grow up. And I think the values that we learned were like you, um, honesty, integrity, working, having responsibility, all those things encompassed. And in the fact that we went only to 8 grades out in the one country school, and had many different teachers, sometimes 3 and 4 teachers during the year. And we only went to school for 8 months. So then I think about, COVID and how much school kids missed. But really, we missed a lot of school too, I think, because of the shorter year and having a lot of transition. But it was interesting. I was checking or comparing the salary of a teacher back then, and it was like $3,300, which would be equivalent to $37,000 today if you figured in inflation. And I'm thinking, well, who would want to come out and teach in a rural school? But
but if they had all those single ranchers around, that might be a big draw.
yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah, you mentioned that romantic aspect of ranching.
Yes.
Then the
Yes.
reality hits, right? Yeah.
Helen, thank you for being our guest today. We've just so enjoyed visiting with you, and we know that we'll see you again down the road, and we're just very grateful for your friendship.
Yes, it was fun, and thanks for reconnecting.
You're
Our
welcome. Our next week's guest will be another fun guest for the 1950s Fun Chat. But right now, we're just being a little secret about that guest, so you'll have to keep updated with us on our preview at the end of this week so that you will know and be enticed by the new guest we will have on the 1950s Fun Chat. So until then, we want you to remember the swell time of poodle skirts, soda jerks, and very cool cars.
And be sure to click the red subscribe button and the thumbs up button and tell your friends, even your relatives, about the 1950s Fun Chat. Join us live every week, Monday, 8 p.m. Central, for the 1950s Fun Chat. But if you can't join us then join us on the YouTube channel and the 1950s Fun Chat.
Hey, if you want to learn more about Jackie and me, there might be some secrets in our closets that are revealed in our book, While the Windmill Watched, A Slice of Rural America in the 1950s. Well, if you do want to learn more about that book and about us, please go to our website. You see the address clicking at the bottom of the screen. It's www.whilethewindmillwatched. And just as might be thinking too about a need for Christmas gifts, and something that would be an exciting gift for people to have is our book. And that can be located in the different locations that sell our book, as well as our national distributor, the NDSU bookstore. So you can click on the purchase there on our website, and you'll get some books shipped to you for gifting.
Well, we want to thank you because we appreciate and thank each and every one of you, our viewers. Until next time, toodaloo.